Have you ever had that strange, almost unexplainable feeling that someone you've never even met is somehow already making their way toward your life? Not by accident, not through some random twist of fate, but because both of your paths have quietly been leading toward the same moment all along. What if the biggest clue that your soulmate is getting closer isn't a text message lighting up your phone, or a chance meeting on the street, or some dramatic confession of love? What if the very first sign is actually something happening inside you, right now, in this ordinary moment, something so quiet and subtle that most people walk right past it without ever noticing? Think for a second about the shifts you've been feeling lately. The people who used to occupy your every thought no longer hold that same grip on your heart. The things that once felt so urgent and important now feel strangely hollow. You're becoming more selective about who and what you let in, more at peace with uncertainty, and oddly enough, less desperate to force love into existence. At first, these changes might feel confusing, even a little unsettling. But what if they're not random at all? What if they're actually preparing you for the most meaningful connection you've ever experienced? Stick with me until the end, because what I'm about to share could genuinely change the way you look at love, timing, and destiny itself. The signs aren't as obvious as most people assume, and they almost never show up in the way we expect them to. By the time you reach the end of this, you might realize that your life has already started shifting in ways you hadn't noticed, and that somewhere out there, someone may already be quietly making room for you in their heart. The biggest transformations in life rarely start with some big dramatic event that everyone around you can see. They begin in places nobody else is paying attention to. Long before a meaningful relationship ever walks into your life, something inside you starts changing quietly, almost invisibly. It's not always obvious right away. You might just start noticing that your old way of thinking doesn't quite fit the person you're becoming anymore. The habits that used to fill your days lose their appeal. The conversations that used to entertain you start to feel a little shallow. Even your dreams begin to shift direction. Without even realizing it, your inner world is quietly preparing itself for a brand new chapter, because every lasting connection always begins on the inside, long before it ever shows up in the outside world. Most people spend their whole lives waiting for outside signs. They convince themselves that the message, the meeting, or the perfect timing will be the exact moment when everything finally changes. They keep scanning the world around them for proof that love is finally on its way. But in doing that, they completely overlook the quiet evidence that's been growing within themselves the whole time. Here's the truth. Those outside events are usually just the final chapter of a process that's been unfolding beneath the surface for months, sometimes even years, before someone truly steps into your life. Your mind, your heart, and your spirit are all quietly reorganizing themselves in ways you can't fully put into words. You're becoming emotionally capable of receiving something that an earlier version of yourself might have struggled to hold on to or protect. This inner shift can feel uncomfortable at times, mostly because growth asks you to let go of patterns that once felt familiar and safe. You start to notice just how much of your energy used to go toward chasing approval from people who never really understood you in the first place. That constant urge to prove your worth slowly starts to fade, and in its place comes a quiet kind of confidence, one that no longer depends on what anyone else thinks of you. This confidence isn't loud or showy. It doesn't demand attention or crave recognition. Instead, it creates a steady inner sense that your value exists whether or not anyone else chooses to acknowledge it. And that single realization changes every relationship in your life, starting with the one you have with yourself. As this transformation keeps unfolding, your emotional reactions start to shift too. Situations that used to send you into a panic no longer have that same hold over you. Rejection starts to feel less like a personal failure and more like a simple sign that something wasn't meant to stay in your life after all. You stop reading every delay as proof that you're somehow unworthy of love. Instead, you start trusting that life moves according to its own rhythm, one that can't be rushed by fear or impatience, no matter how badly you want it to. That trust creates a kind of inner calm that becomes far stronger than any need for constant reassurance from someone else. There's also a growing sense of honesty that tends to show up during this period of your life. You stop pretending to enjoy things that quietly drain you. You stop chasing people who repeatedly make you question your own worth. You become more willing to walk away from situations that ask you to abandon your true self just to feel accepted. And even though this can feel lonely for a while, it's actually clearing out space for something far healthier to come in. Every false connection that falls away leaves room for a genuine one to grow in its place. Maybe the most remarkable part of this transformation is that it often happens quietly, with no applause from anyone around you. No one may notice how much stronger you've become, or how many nights you spent rebuilding yourself after disappointment. And yet these unseen victories are exactly what shape the person you're becoming, preparing you to recognize love not as something meant to rescue you from emptiness, but as something that complements the wholeness you've already built within yourself. Once that inner shift is complete, you stop searching for someone to complete your life, simply because your life has already begun to feel complete on its own. One of the most misunderstood parts of the journey toward a meaningful relationship is that strange feeling that everything familiar seems to be falling apart around you. People often assume that when doors start closing, when opportunities disappear, or when certain relationships come to an end, life must be working against them somehow. They interpret loss as failure and endings as proof they're drifting further from the future they actually want. But sometimes life isn't taking anything valuable away from you at all. It's simply clearing out what can no longer exist alongside the person you're becoming. Before a deep and lasting connection ever enters your life, there's usually a quiet process of removal happening first. It's not always comfortable, but it's absolutely purposeful. Think about how a garden grows. Before new flowers can bloom, the weeds have to be pulled first. In much the same way, life starts removing emotional burdens, outdated beliefs, unhealthy attachments, and habits that once served a purpose but now stand in the way of something greater waiting for you. This process rarely feels exciting while it's happening. More often it feels like confusion or unexpected upheaval. And yet underneath that uncertainty, something essential is quietly being prepared for you. A lot of people cling to relationships simply because they're afraid of being alone. They stay connected to people who constantly drain their energy, holding on to some hope that things will eventually get better. Over time, these connections start to feel familiar, even when they're clearly unhealthy, because familiarity has a sneaky way of disguising itself as comfort, which makes it hard to recognize when something has already run its course. But as you start growing emotionally, your tolerance for these kinds of situations begins to change. You start noticing conversations that leave you feeling exhausted instead of inspired. You start recognizing patterns of disrespect that you used to just brush off. You begin choosing peace over constant emotional struggle, even when that choice means walking away from people you once believed would always be part of your story. And this process isn't limited to relationships alone. Old habits also start losing their grip on you. Activities that used to distract you from your feelings stop giving you the same satisfaction they once did. You become more aware of how you spend your time, where your attention keeps drifting, and what's really shaping your thoughts day to day. Without forcing anything, you naturally start choosing whatever nourishes your inner life instead of whatever just fills up empty hours. These small shifts might seem minor on the surface, but they're quietly reshaping your entire daily existence and building a much stronger foundation for whatever connection comes next. These kinds of beliefs usually come from past experiences, and for a long time they can feel like unquestionable truths about who you are. But as your awareness keeps expanding, you start to challenge them one by one. You come to realize that real, healthy love doesn't ask you to abandon your own identity or make yourself smaller just so someone else can feel bigger by comparison. What makes this period especially difficult is that life rarely explains why these changes are happening while they're unfolding. You might wonder why certain friendships are fading or why opportunities you were counting on suddenly vanish. The emptiness you once feared wasn't punishment, it was an invitation, allowing your heart and life to become spacious enough to welcome a connection built on mutual growth and real emotional freedom rather than fear or dependency. There are certain moments in life when ordinary events suddenly start to feel strangely meaningful. A song plays at exactly the right moment. A particular number keeps showing up wherever you go. You think about someone out of nowhere and, unexpectedly, they reach out to you not long after. You keep encountering the same message over and over through completely different people, books, or conversations. On the surface, these experiences might look like nothing more than random coincidences, easy enough to shrug off as pure chance. And yet there are times when life seems to speak to us through quiet patterns rather than direct, obvious answers. These moments invite you to become more aware, not because they can predict the future with any real certainty, but because they gently nudge you to pay closer attention to the subtle changes unfolding both within you and all around you. Most people move through their days on a kind of autopilot. Their minds stay occupied with routines, worries, and endless distractions, which causes them to overlook the small details that make each day genuinely unique. But once you start growing emotionally, your awareness naturally begins to expand. You start noticing things that used to slip right past you completely. A familiar place suddenly feels different somehow. An unexpected conversation leaves a lasting impression on you. A simple encounter with a total stranger shifts your entire perspective in a way you can't fully explain. These moments aren't necessarily extraordinary because of what actually happens on the outside. They become meaningful because of the way they quietly awaken something on the inside. As your inner world shifts and changes, your perception of the outer world naturally shifts right along with it. You become less focused on trying to control every single outcome and more open to simply observing how life continues to unfold at its own pace. Instead of rushing through each day desperately searching for one specific answer, you start recognizing that guidance often shows up in quiet, unexpected forms you never anticipated. Sometimes it arrives through a single sentence spoken by someone who has no idea just how deeply their words are affecting you. Sometimes it shows up in a book you randomly picked up to read, only to discover its pages seem to describe exactly what you've been silently struggling with. These moments can feel deeply personal, not because the universe is secretly sending you hidden messages, but because your growing awareness lets you connect ideas and experiences in ways you simply couldn't before. One of the more remarkable shifts during this period is the sense that certain encounters seem to happen at exactly the right time. You meet someone who introduces you to a new opportunity right when you are finally ready for a change. A delayed plan unexpectedly leads to a conversation that ends up altering your entire direction. An event you almost decided to skip becomes exactly the place where an important connection begins to form. Looking back later, these moments seem woven together by some invisible thread. At the time, though, they simply felt like ordinary parts of everyday life. It's only through reflection afterward that their deeper meaning finally becomes clear. There comes a point in your journey when the longing that once completely consumed your thoughts starts losing its grip on you. You notice that you're no longer measuring your happiness by whether someone texts you, notices you, or chooses you over anyone else. Instead of waking up anxious about who might walk into your life next, you wake up with a quiet appreciation for the life you're already busy building for yourself. This shift feels subtle, and yet it changes absolutely everything. It marks the exact moment. As you continue growing emotionally, something remarkable starts to happen. You stop treating every single interaction as some kind of test of your personal value. If someone responds warmly, you appreciate it. If they don't, you no longer see that as proof that something is wrong with you. You come to understand that not every connection is meant to continue, and not every person is meant to remain part of your story forever. This realization frees you from the exhausting habit of overanalyzing every conversation, every silence, and every delayed reply you receive. Your peace no longer depends on someone else's choices, because it's rooted in something much deeper than outside approval. This inner calm also changes the way you carry yourself through the world day to day. Your decisions become less influenced by fear and more guided by authenticity. You stop pretending to enjoy things simply to impress people around you. You no longer hide parts of your personality out of some worry that someone might not accept you as you are. Instead, you become more honest, more relaxed, and far more comfortable expressing your true thoughts and feelings out loud. Ironically, this authenticity ends up making you far more approachable than any carefully crafted image ever could. People are naturally drawn toward those who feel at ease with themselves, because genuine confidence creates a sense of safety that simply can't be faked or imitated. Another important shift shows up in how you spend your time each day. Rather than waiting for life to finally begin once the right person shows up, you start investing your energy into becoming fully present exactly where you already are. You explore new interests, strengthen the friendships that matter most, chase personal goals, and create experiences that genuinely enrich your life. Regardless of your relationship status, love stops being the center of your identity. It becomes one beautiful part of an already meaningful existence, rather than the whole point of it. This mindset takes an enormous amount of pressure off future relationships, because you're no longer asking another person to carry the full weight of your happiness on their shoulders. The most powerful part of this whole transformation is that it simply can't be faked. Real emotional peace isn't something you perform for other people just to appear more attractive. It develops slowly, through honest self-reflection, real healing, and a genuine willingness to let go of the need for constant control. There will still be moments of uncertainty along the way, moments when old fears quietly resurface, but they no longer get to define your actions the way they used to. Instead of reacting impulsively, you respond with patience and clarity. Instead of chasing after people who repeatedly create confusion in your life, you naturally start moving toward those whose presence brings calm instead of chaos. And in that quiet state of emotional balance, you finally become capable of recognizing love for exactly what it truly is. Not a reward for your effort or a solution to your loneliness, but a shared journey between two people who've each learned to stand firmly on their own before ever choosing to walk forward together. One of the most comforting truths about meaningful relationships is that they're never created by just one person alone. While you're busy growing, learning, and preparing yourself for a deeper connection, someone else out there may be going through a transformation entirely their own. You may have never met them. You might not know their name, where they live, or what their daily life even looks like right now. And yet, just as you're becoming more emotionally aware, they might also be quietly changing in ways that make room for someone new to eventually enter their world too. This idea is a good reminder that genuine connection isn't about one person doing all the work while the other stays exactly the same. It's about two separate journeys slowly moving toward the very same destination. A lot of people imagine that love begins the moment two people first meet. In reality, the preparation for that moment often begins long before that first conversation ever takes place. The person who's meant to share an important chapter of your life might currently be letting go of painful memories, recovering from disappointment, or learning lessons that once seemed completely impossible to understand. They might be discovering the importance of honesty after years spent quietly hiding their emotions from everyone around them. They might be realizing that success means very little if there's no one there to actually share it with. Without even realizing it, they're slowly becoming someone capable of offering the kind of relationship they simply couldn't have sustained during an earlier stage of their life. This perspective also encourages a lot more patience with your own path forward. Instead of wondering why you haven't met the right person yet, you start asking whether both lives are truly ready for the kind of connection that can actually last. You stop viewing every delay as some kind of missed opportunity and start seeing it instead as extra time for both hearts to grow stronger before coming together. This shift replaces frustration with genuine trust. It reminds you that meaningful relationships aren't only about finding someone in the right place, but about meeting them at the right stage of emotional growth as well. As your awareness continues to deepen, you might notice your own expectations becoming healthier too. You stop chasing perfection because you understand that every single person carries a unique story shaped by both victories and disappointments. Rather than expecting someone else to rescue you from every difficulty, you start appreciating the quiet idea of simply walking alongside another person who's also learned the value of resilience over time. The relationship becomes less about escaping loneliness and more about sharing two complete whole lives that have each been shaped by real experience. Maybe the most beautiful part of all this is realizing that while you can't control another person's journey, you can trust that they're actually living one. Somewhere out there, someone might be learning the exact lessons that will one day allow them to recognize your kindness, value your presence, and welcome you with openness instead of fear. Their life is quietly making room for someone they haven't met yet, just as your own heart has been making space through healing, growth, and honest self-discovery. And when those two separate journeys finally intersect, the connection feels less like something that appeared out of nowhere and more like the natural meeting point of two people who were each becoming ready in ways they never fully understood until the moment their paths finally crossed. A lot of people expect a life-changing relationship to arrive wrapped in overwhelming excitement. They imagine that when the right person is finally approaching, they'll feel restless, impatient, and completely consumed by anticipation. But the deepest kind of readiness rarely feels like emotional chaos at all. It actually feels surprisingly quiet. Instead of constant excitement, there's a steady sense that you no longer need to force anything to happen. You start moving through life with far less urgency and a lot more trust. This inner certainty doesn't come from knowing exactly who's coming or when they'll finally show up. It comes from recognizing that you've become capable of meeting love without losing yourself in the process. In earlier stages of life, relationships often feel tangled up with fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being rejected, fear of not being chosen, or fear of simply running out of time. These fears create a lot of pressure. They make every single interaction feel loaded with meaning, and every disappointment feel like a personal defeat. When someone isn't emotionally ready yet, they tend to search for guarantees before they'll ever open their heart. They want certainty that they'll never be hurt, abandoned, or misunderstood by anyone. But genuine readiness actually begins the moment that need for guarantees starts fading away. You come to understand that vulnerability is simply part of every meaningful connection, and you become willing to experience love without demanding complete control over how it turns out. This shift changes the way you see yourself entirely. You stop treating your relationship status as some kind of measure of your worth as a person. That doesn't mean you stop wanting connection altogether. It just means your desire is no longer tangled up with desperation. You can want companionship while still feeling completely whole on your own, and that kind of emotional independence creates a foundation far stronger than excitement alone, because it allows love to grow from genuine choice rather than need. You might also notice your standards becoming clearer during this stage. Instead of being drawn only to intensity, you start appreciating consistency, honesty, and emotional safety. The qualities that once seemed boring compared to drama now feel deeply valuable. You become less interested in people who create confusion and far more interested in those who bring clarity, a real sign that your heart has matured and no longer mistakes turbulence for passion. Another important part of readiness is the ability to stay present instead of constantly imagining future scenarios in your head. You become more engaged with the life actually unfolding in front of you. You enjoy conversations without immediately turning them into fantasies about what they might become. You meet new people with genuine curiosity instead of heavy expectation, which lets relationships develop naturally instead of being rushed by fear. It creates space for real understanding because you're finally seeing the other person as they truly are, not as some solution to your loneliness. There's also a growing resilience that comes with this inner certainty. You know that even if a connection doesn't work out, you'll still be able to stand firmly on your own. Past disappointments no longer convince you love is impossible. They simply remind you that every experience has contributed to your growth. This resilience removes a lot of the anxiety that used to surround relationships, because your identity is no longer fragile or dependent on someone else's approval. Maybe the most remarkable thing about this kind of readiness is that it usually arrives quietly, with no dramatic moment announcing that you're finally prepared. You simply know, deep down, that when the right connection appears, you'll be able to meet it with openness and quiet strength rather than fear, because your heart has already learned how to stay steady long before love arrives. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Your presence, your attention, and your willingness to sit with these ideas mean more than you probably realize. If any part of this resonated with you, let it be a gentle reminder to keep believing in your own journey, even when the path ahead feels quiet or uncertain. May you find peace in your heart, clarity in your mind, strength through every challenge that comes your way, and the courage to embrace the love and opportunities that are truly meant for you. Wishing you nothing but good things on this journey. May every step you take bring you closer to the life, the purpose, and the connection your heart has quietly been preparing for all along. Take good care of yourself, keep growing at your own pace, and thank you again for being here with me. Until next time, stay true to who you really are, and never stop believing that the best chapters of your story might still be waiting up ahead.